Great Britain must win this in order to stay in third position. Great Britain second, but it's very, very close indeed. Israel have gone into third position, Norway in fourth, and this is the German Oliver Anders. But here's Mark Woods for Great Britain. Now Woods going like a train up this first 50. Mark Woods of Great Britain. Woods has pulled back about 3 or 4 metres up the first 50. Oliver breathing to his right, knows exactly where he is. That's a great first 50 from Mark Woods. Remember, whoever wins this race will finish third in the overall medals table, and back comes Mark Woods for Great Britain. They're inside the final 25 now. Woods has pulled back 7 metres. There's only a half a metre in it now. Mark Woods of Great Britain is getting on level terms with Oliver Anders of Germany. Anders just holding on. Woods is coming back again though. But, Anders gets it. 12/100ths of a second means another gold medal for Germany. Silver for Great Britain, Rob. Mark Woods doing the race of his life and possibly having the disappointment of his life. A superb swim, 12/100ths of a second, and that shot says it all. Mark Woods of Great Britain anchoring that great medley relay team, but only good enough to win silver in 4:41.62. The team of Uren, Matthews, Long and Woods win yet another silver for the British swimming team here in Atlanta.
It's a great pleasure to welcome Mark Woods and my program today. Mark is an extraordinary man, Olympic, Paralympic swimmer, 12 medals, 33 international medals, but that is just the beginning of Mark's story. Mark is a mountaineer, he's a charity man, he's a writer, but above all, in my mind, he is Mr. Inspiration himself. So Mark, what an introduction.
Wow.
Thank you
very much.
Do you know,
we could stop there.
But you know, I really enjoyed when I came to one of your conferences and you did inspire me. So that's why we are together here, and it's a great privilege.
Very kind.
Let me ask you a question in a roundabout way. Rumi, who's my favorite philosopher, he said, "Do not worry that your life is turning upside down. How do you know that the side you are used to is better than the one to come?" Mm-hmm. Now, Mark, at the age of 17, your life turned upside down.
Yeah, absolutely could say that. So I was diagnosed with a type of bone cancer, osteosarcoma, and it meant that I had to have my leg amputated and a whole bunch of chemotherapy. I guess it did turn upside down, but it turned upside down in a kind of slow way because I knew I had an issue, and the longer that issue stayed there, the more I began to think it was a serious issue. So it was kind of a gradual process. I think it was actually harder on my family than it was on me. Teenagers are pretty robust, I think, a lot of the ones that I meet anyway, and also quite ignorant. So I was fairly ignorant as a 17-year-old.
Maybe that was a good thing.
And in this instance, it was a good thing because I didn't really fully appreciate the gravity of the situation. That my chances of survival weren't great, but I was ignorant and arrogant enough to think that I'll be fine. So that was maybe a positive thing.
But you said you worried about the people around you. I don't want to drop names in a way, but when I was speaking to Andrea Bocelli, and he said in his book, he said, when I became blind, my first thought was to think, what will my mother feel?
Absolutely.
What a noble thought. And in many ways, you said the same thing about your dad. Tell us about how your father felt, because you mentioned him as being your hero.
Oh yeah, I mean, many family members are heroes of mine, really, so it's very important to me, family. But my father, I vividly remember when I got diagnosed, him being very shook by that diagnosis and kind of being very close to tears, and he gave me a big hug and he said, I wish it was me. And I said, I wouldn't want you to have to go through this. You know, I'll go through this, you know. And yeah, absolutely, it was at the forefront of my mind, the impact it was having on my family. And I know that's not unusual. I go and I for a long time have supported a charity called Teenage Cancer Trust. And I would go and visit young people in cancer units who were going through the same thing that I went through. And quite often they say the biggest challenge they're facing, given that they're having all this treatment and big operations, the biggest challenge they face is that they feel responsible for the happiness of their family.
What a noble way to think.
It's a noble thing, but it's quite a burden, you know, for these young people. You know, that they feel as though they need to help keep their parents happy, but it's an impossible task. You know, as a parent myself now, you know, if I felt as though my child felt responsible for keeping me happy whilst they were going through something so horrendous, I would find that quite difficult.
So what would you say? I mean, it's a very, very interesting point, because we tend to look at, I wouldn't call it the victim, but the person who is in the hardship, the problem. But what would you say to the parents of such people? Because there is such a big dilemma, isn't it?
There's a huge dilemma.
What advice would you give them?
I think this advice would be the same for whether it's a parent or a friend or whatever the relationship you have with the individual is. You need to try and maintain the relationship you had prior to that. You don't cease being the friend or the mother or the brother. You are still that person. The kind of the horizon may have changed, but you're still that person. And when somebody's going through a life-changing experience like that, they need something that grounds them. And so don't try and be the doctor and the nurse and the psychologist. Just be the mom and the dad and the grandparent and the friend.
So just stay.
You stay as best you can. Hey, look, this is not an easy thing to do. But when people say to me, a friend of mine's been diagnosed, what should I do? I said, just carry on being yourself.
I think that is good advice. That is solid advice. It's not complicated, but it actually gives the message. Yeah. Did you go through this why me moment?
Very, very briefly. Very, very briefly. And I'm careful where I share this, although I appreciate I'm being recorded. So this could be shared anywhere.
Yes.
But I wouldn't say it necessarily directly to a young person who was going through the similar kind of diagnosis. But I had a why me moment for about 10 minutes after I was diagnosed. I wandered off and I was thinking, oh, no, why me? Why is this? Why am I going to have to have my leg amputated? I mean, I'd said to the doctor, what if I don't want to? And they'd say, well, you'll die. So there's very little decision between those two things. But still, I did, for about 10 minutes, thought, why me? And then I suddenly thought, actually, what would I think if this happened to somebody else? You know, if this happened to somebody else that went to my school, well, would I feel sorry for them? A little, perhaps. But actually, I would go back to focusing on what mattered to me in my life and what I was doing that day. And I realised very early on that nobody was going to feel really sorry for me outside of my family. So I didn't want to feel sorry for myself, and I think that really helped me through the whole situation, because by not feeling sorry for myself, it enabled me to carry on living, even though I never really knew how long. None of us know how long we have.
I know, but just to say a little bit more, the prognosis was really almost, even after the amputation, 50-50.
Yeah, it's
something very severe.
At that time, a bone cancer like that, and I had spent some time with something wrong, so we weren't sure how long I'd had that tumour. It was a 50-50. I always thought I was in the right 50. It turns out I was in the right 50. But yeah, I think feeling sorry for yourself achieves little. You know, it doesn't help. You know, in the same way, worry doesn't help. We can't help worrying sometimes, but it seldom helps.
So really, what you're saying is acceptance is the key to moving on, perhaps.
Yeah, certainly for me. But accepting the situation, you know, I quite often will say now, when little things occur, I'll say, well, we are where we are. You know, we can't change where we are right now. In hindsight, we might have done something different, but we're here now. So let's make the best decision from this point.
So really, having accepted the consequences, what would your life have been, if you can project something like this, if you hadn't had this event?
So difficult to know, isn't it? You know, what would your life have been like if you hadn't become a chartered accountant?
That would be very sad.
Or joyous, you know.
Yes.
So I think it's very hard to know. I think if this hadn't have happened to me, would I have been as focused and as perhaps empathetic to others? Would I have been as determined to make the most of my life as I am? Possibly not.
Well, you've just thrown in two of the most remarkable words, focused and empathy. You know, they don't come easily, my friend.
Well, they don't come together that easily.
And so if that was a consequence and not the consequence of what happened, well, I think that's a gold medal.
Yeah, both those things are a gift, and I would say, without trying to belittle having cancer or having a major operation like that, I would say hand on heart that I gained more than I lost.
That's something.
I lost a limb and a year out of my life having all that treatment, but I gained so much more, which I'm still benefiting from.
You answered you answered it amazingly. But I mean, do we all have to go through that sort of precipice of life? Do we all be looking at the cliff edge of life before having the sort of realization you clearly have had? I mean, there's no question in the way you speak and the way you behave that it is exceptional. Your achievement is in many different things.
I never think of it as exceptional. I think, I'm looking out of the window in front of me here, which unfortunately you can't see, but I'm looking out there and I can see these beautiful trees, and I can see the main trunk going up and then it branches. And if you climb a tree, quite often you choose the strongest branch each time and keep going up the tree. And I feel that's all I've done.
Yeah.
Is I've carried on climbing the tree of life, if you want to call it that.
Very nice.
But I've just chosen the best option as I've climbed. I don't feel as though I've done anything special.
But my question actually is, yes, you may. It's good to be modest. Anyway, it's a good quality outside being,
realistic.
Also being, whatever you want to call it. But in any event, humility is a good thing. However, you have not really explained to.
What was your question again?
My question.
What was your question again?
Well, let me ask you again, because it's so important. Do we all have to have that of life-threatening experience to pull ourselves together and say, this is a short life, you know?
Okay.
So say something sensible.
I got sidetracked. Okay, so unfortunately, it does appear that most people do require a life-changing incident to really appraise life. There are those amongst us who don't, for whatever reason, whether it's their early upbringing or they're hardwired to look at life differently. But for a large majority of the world, it appears that some kind of emotional or physical turmoil is necessary to reset them. As much as I try to engage with people and encourage them to do this anyway, I think the reality is people go back to their kind of their common state. Yeah.
Mm. So, although I know you fight back on this one when I say you achieved a huge amount, I think, but you will correct me, I'm sure. I think at that point in time you lost all fear, because having crossed the fear of death, there's nothing you couldn't conquer. Sorry, I'm putting words in your mouth. But I feel that is one of the things that holds us back. Not just you, Mark, but all of us. The fear of the unknown, the fear of doing something remarkably different. Is that something that...
It's really, I knew you'd ask me some good questions. So I think that I am better at not being fearful, but it doesn't mean that I'm always have that. So I think, I am very keen to attempt things which I may question whether I'm capable of doing it, but I will still attempt to do them. Whereas quite often people will do things that they feel very comfortable with. They call it the comfort zone. We know that phrase. I try to put myself out there. Does it mean that I'm never fearful? No. I think there's always, we all have this inner voice, and occasionally that inner voice is not helpful. You know, and it will say, "Are you sure? You can't do this." And I think I still have that. And so there is occasionally a fear of failure occur. For example, you know, I'm not quite shaking in my boots about it, but there's a fear of not being the best parent I could be, for example. Fear is maybe the wrong word, but it's that desire to be as good as I can be. Is there, and I'm cognizant of it. Is it a fear? Probably not. No. In the true meaning of the word fear, but I am very keen.
Yes. Good attempt, but
yeah.
but I think you are saying that you have less fear, perhaps, if nothing. Nobody can be fearless.
Yes, yeah.
You have less fear, and I think problem with most of us, we carry on with our lives in this frame, you know, and don't want to take too many risks. It's comfort zone. I think what you try to do, and so it seems, to say, oh, I think I'll go and climb this mountain, you know, and I'll do this. And
I think in some ways I became a bit of a challenge junkie.
Yes.
In some ways, that overcoming the cancer, having the amputation, then becoming an international swimmer and winning a lot of medals, you become almost addicted to the challenge.
That's a very good point.
And so there's an element of that in me, definitely.
So you stole the next question, actually, and the next question was really: is it necessary to always be competing, and above all, always wanting to win?
I don't think,
because that seems to be your life sort of, you want to win all the time.
I would disagree. So, and the reason I would disagree is that I realised quite early on in my swimming career that it was impossible to focus on the end goal all of the time. So the end goal might well have been trying to win a particular event, but to try to maintain thinking about a piece of metal and a ribbon for 4 years, it's not healthy. It's impossible. Yeah. So actually I switched much more to being more focused on trying to achieve my potential. So that
so against yourself?
Against myself. So is it all about competition? Yes, if that competition is internal, about me trying to achieve what I'm trying to achieve. So the mountaineering, for example, I'm not conquering the mountain. Nobody conquers a mountain. I'm conquering myself and everything that inside me that's telling me you really shouldn't be climbing this mountain. That's what I'm conquering. And now in business or whatever I do, it's about trying to achieve my potential and conquering the things that are trying to stop me doing that.
So really your 10% theory, meaning most people do 90%, but can we get them to do their potential, which is 100%.
Do their potential, and it doesn't mean nobody achieves 100% of the time.
We can achieve 110, but anyhow.
No, I disagree. That's a mathematical impossible. You're an accountant by trade.
Okay,
there's no such thing as 110%.
I withdraw my question. I agree, but you also say, and I like to talk about your book just for a minute or two, and here it is. It's a beautiful book. It's amazing. It's like a life manual and a sort of. How would you describe this? It says how to achieve your full potential.
Yes. Well, it's a combination, I guess, of my story, some of which we're sharing today, and some insights into learning and development. So I might talk about how I stayed motivated, and then once I've shared a story about that, I will then say, well, here's what other people think about motivation, and then here's what my coach thought about motivation. So I wouldn't call it a manual. I would call it's actually the perfect thickness. If you've got a wobbly table, you can put it under the leg of the table and it won't wobble anymore.
There you are.
Yeah.
You actually, I know you don't want me to necessarily quote from the book, but actually
You can quote, but don't ask me to quote.
Okay, well I won't, because I don't know the last time you read the thing.
A long while.
But you did say, and really struck me, you said motivational, because you just mentioned the word motivation. Motivational factors that align with your ethical and spiritual beliefs will be extremely powerful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really. It's worth actually just elaborating, because it means a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are millions of ways we can try and motivate ourselves. I might be motivated to try and finish this interview quickly so that I can go out and enjoy the nice weather.
Yes.
Not all of them are positive.
Yes.
Sometimes it's about trying to prove people wrong, which can be useful but not positive. So I think the stronger ones are when they mean something to you inside. If I think I do things and make choices based on what is right for my family, what would my father, who passed away more than 20 years ago, what would he think? I'm motivated by those kind of things as much as I am about any particular gain that I might have, or that my ability to put food on the table, although obviously is a motivator.
But actually, you're not telling the whole truth, I think, because I think you are driven hugely by helping other people.
Yeah.
I like to quote something which may not strike a nerve, but Helen Keller, the blind deaf writer, she said the best and most beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or even touched. They must be felt with the heart. Now, actually, all your life, it seems, revolves around, although you make a bit of money out of it sometimes, helping so many charities, you also help, actually, even in your earning capacity, all you're trying to do is to help people.
Yeah, I'd like to think I'm trying to affect positive change.
Yes.
And whether it's in a charitable way, I get asked to do an awful lot of charity stuff, and I would always try and do it if I can do it, if I've got the time to do it. But I will only do it if I feel as though I'm going to make a positive change and it's relevant. I have no desire to have a tick sheet of great people that I've worked with if I've had no impact on those people.
Certainly you're working with me. So
yeah, well, I'm hoping that you become a better person by the end of the interview.
I'm here to learn. I'm here to learn.
And that's the same in the corporate work that I do. It is that I feel as though I give people a stimulus that gives them time to think about things which might affect a positive change for them.
Do you know, talking about positive change, diversity is one of the topics that you really advise on, consult on at the highest possible level. Tell us why diversity is so important, having a diverse workforce or whatever you cover. Tell us why it's important.
Well, the world is a diverse place. Most of the organisations that I work with are global organisations, so they are communicating and trying to either sell or support a very diverse group of people. To do that well, you have to have people within your organisation who are diverse as well. And I don't just mean diverse in terms of the colour of your skin or your sexual orientation, either male or female or age. I mean diversity of thought. If you have a group of people...
Irrespective of their colour, creed and so on.
Absolutely, but if they all went to the same university or they all have never struggled socioeconomically, then they are all going to think in a certain way. And so, whereas if you can bring a group of people who have diversity of thought, they might all be, as people say to me, male, stale and pale, but they still have diversity of thought. So I think, yes, it's an easy way of measuring diversity to look at, creed and religion and those things, but it's more about what you have here.
And it's a practical point.
Absolutely. The organisations that do this well are more successful.
Yes.
So I think that the senior people within organisations still maybe are doing tick box diversity because they know society thinks they should, but they're still missing the big.
But I mean, diversity really is a small part of prejudice, in a sense. And what is your view on how people's prejudice about different people operate?
Well, I'm no expert on this, because I think because I am not a prejudiced individual, but I can give you an insight in terms of how I changed the way I view disability, because that is a group of people, section of society, disabled people who do face prejudice. But I know I changed when I became a disabled person, as somebody with one leg, and sort of thought, what am I thinking? You know, why should I consider that this person is less capable than me because they have a certain disability? Now, they may be less capable at a very specific thing, but it doesn't mean they are less capable as a whole. And you know, it's like I think it was Einstein who said, you know, if you ask a fish to climb a tree, it will always consider itself a failure, or something like
very
that.
Good. Very good. The fishing analogy is good for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I share a story around my favourite question that children ask me, and children will ask me, "What is it like to be disabled?" And I will say, "Yeah, it's a great question. 7-year-olds ask you that question, but adults don't ask you that question." And I say, well, let me ask you 2 questions first. Who's the most disabled person in this room? They'll say, well, you are. You have one leg. Fine. And then I'd say, now, who's the fastest swimmer in this room? I'd say, well, you are. You have a gold medal. Fine. So who's disabled at swimming? Me or you? And you can see them all. They suddenly think, you know, well, I'm disabled. But the point is that disability is relative to the task. And we're all good at certain things, and we're all less so good or disabled at other things, and you need to judge people by the things that they can do, not what they can't do, and that applies to disability, gender, race, religion. You know, don't judge people by the thing that it makes them different, just by the things that makes them the same.
I think you're right. In many ways, of course, if you lack something, and use the word disabled, often people are more able because they try harder, try to compensate, you know. But I worry sometimes about the facilities that are provided by the government, or I mean, you're a hero and you're in many ways mobile, but I sometimes worry about the facilities that are available for people who cannot get along.
Yeah, I think yes, there's definitely some issues in terms of the physical accessibility for people with disabilities, but the larger barrier are the social barriers that put up.
People think.
It's the fact that, you know, they might, like I read on social media the other day, a disabled woman saying, I was told that I couldn't go to the toilet on the aeroplane because it would distress people, me trying to make my way down the aisle. I would have to wait until the plane landed. Like, that is wrong. It's wrong on so many levels.
Yeah.
But that is more of an issue than the fact that a wheelchair won't go through a toilet door, and you know, you can fix that like that. You can make the door wider.
But thinking is different.
But the thinking across a population, across society, is more of a challenge.
That's a very good way to put it. Mark, there is one thing in your book which I would like to quote, and that's the end of the book, and it says, "If only." And I'm going to. He said, "What is the worst thing you could say when lying on your deathbed?" And you went on to say, if only I wish I could have, but I didn't." I guess that's what you're trying to say.
Absolutely. I think that's, you talked earlier about not being fearful, but I think if you've picked out my greatest fear there, and that is that I should lie on my deathbed and have those kind of thoughts and think, I wish I had, if only I'd done this. I want to think that I gave it my best shot. I did the right thing for the people that matter to me, and that whilst I may have made some decisions which turned out to be wrong, or I wasn't necessarily successful at everything, that I did my best.
And I think that's what you would say to the people for their own lives, other people. Because
Absolutely.
if they viewed that particular moment, then things might change.
At a moment in time, you know, you can't do better than your best. That's what my father used to say to me when I was a young child and I was involved in sport or whatever it was. He'd say, you can't do better than your best. Whatever your best is today, you try and do that.
Mark, it's been amazing talking to you, but we can conclude with a quote from Buddha, actually, because Buddha said, everything that has a beginning has an ending. Make peace with that and all will be well. So I make our conversation an ending. It's been great talking to you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you
It was a
so
pleasure.
much indeed.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Well, the swimmers settling down now for the bend in the pool that many have anticipated here, the 4x100 metres freestyle for men. And there's the lineup for you. Brazil drawn in 1, China in 2, Canada in 3, Great Britain in 4, Spain in 5, Australia 6, Germany 7, and Russia in lane 8. 4 times, 2 lengths of the pool. Canadians are strong, the Australians are strong, and so are the British quartet. Matt Walker will lead them off. And Walker, the first swimmer in the 4th lane to get away. And in the 3rd lane, it's Canada, Philippe Gagnon, who has an early lead, and that's a pretty good lead indeed.
This event talked about all day and shared amongst the British swimmers. The Canadian have gone awesomely strong team, and so have the Australians. But the selection of the individual swimmers here can make all the difference. And the Brits, well, it's an interesting selection.
He's useful, but he's a long, long way down. But this, as we said, is all about categories and the selection of the categories to go on a particular leg. And this is Marc Woods. Marc Woods, his father died quite recently. A poignant moment for him, a member of this British quartet.
The 2 remaining swimmers can bring this relay team home. There was such hype that the individuals were so fired up, they were so praying for gold. I actually feel they can do it with the selection they may have, but at the end of the day we've seen Canada so far ahead, but I think Australia are going to be so tough to beat. Kick those legs and work those arms. Let's keep it going.
Well, this is absolutely fascinating. Great Britain are closing Canada down, and the celebration's already beginning. Great Britain now in the lead. On the near side, Brockenside, Australia, the Brazilian coming through very closely on the top of your picture now. But it's Great Britain 1, and it's Australia in there in 2nd place in silver medal position, and the Canadians are being swum down by the Brazilians. But it's going to be gold for Great Britain, and what a remarkable relay. Gold for Great Britain, silver for Australia, and bronze for Brazil. They've come through on Canada, and Canada get nothing. What a magnificent performance by the British quartet. Matt Walker, and I'm so pleased for Marc Woods, Dave Roberts and Jodie Cundy, and they came through the margin of advantage a couple of metres at the end, but it's gold, and that was magnificent. Well, there's the evidence, 4:06.85, and the world record has gone.
Oh man, yeah, it's all mine, Mum. Oh, I just so wanted to do it for Dad and for you and everybody else.
Well, Mark, 58.66 on the clock there.
That's brilliant. I mean, I'm so proud to be part of the British team and part of this team, the swimming team, and most of all, my dad died the week that I was meant to come out here, and I'm proud to have been his son, and I'm done it for him. He had a good seat tonight, I think.